The envelope landed on the white tablecloth between a half-empty bottle of Prosecco and a plate of canapés nobody had touched. My daughter-in-law hadn't even opened it. She'd held it for 3 seconds, felt the weight, and set it down the way you'd set down something you found in a lost and found bin. "Is this a card?" She smiled at me, that particular smile she saved for when she was performing Patience. "How sweet." "Open it," I said. She did. She pulled out the document slowly, like she was expecting a printed poem or a Sobeys gift card. Her eyes moved across the first page. Then she looked up at my son. "Fletcher," her voice dropped, "these are Jeeks." My son crossed the room in 4 strides. He glanced at the papers. "Mom, these are from the 90s. "Some of them," I said. "Some are newer." His wife's mother, Claudine, appeared from somewhere behind the catering table, white wine in hand, wearing the kind of dress that announced itself before she did. She peered at the documents over her daughter's shoulder. "Oh," she said, and that single syllable contained an entire opinion. "Your mother works nights at the hospital, doesn't she, Fletcher?" Claudine set her glass down carefully. "That's lovely, truly, but perhaps next time." She gestured vaguely at the room around us, the exposed brick walls, the custom masking, the framed architectural drawings my son had hung in perfectly measured intervals. "Something a little more appropriate for the occasion?" My daughter-in-law laughed, a short, bright sound. "Jeeks," she said again, to no one in particular. She placed the documents back in the envelope and set it behind a flower arrangement, out of sight. I looked at my son. He looked at his shoes. I picked up my coat from the rack by the door, said goodbye to no one, and walked out into the November air. King Street was loud and cold and smelled like snow coming. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching cabs go by, and then I walked to the parking garage on Adelaide and drove myself home. The documents in that envelope represented 33 years of night shifts. Before we go any further, have you ever worked hard for something your whole life and had someone dismiss it in 3 seconds flat? Leave a comment. I read every single one. The building my son chose for his architecture studio sat on the corner of King Street West and Spadina Avenue in downtown Toronto. 6 stories, heritage brick facade, ground floor retail, upper floors converted to office space. Fletcher had told me about it over dinner the previous spring, practically glowing. "The neighborhood's perfect, Mom. The clients we want. They walk past that building every day." I had nodded and said nothing. I own that building. Not Fletcher, not my daughter-in-law, not Claudine with her Westmount address and her opinions about appropriate gift-giving. Me. Through a numbered company I registered in 1998, 2241847 Ontario Limited, which nobody has ever connected to the woman who spent 3 decades working the overnight shift at Lakeview Regional Hospital in Mississauga. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Lorna Beckett. I am 63 years old. I have been a registered nurse since 1984, and I worked nights for most of those years because the shift differential helped, and because nights suited me. The particular quiet of a hospital at 3 in the morning, the way time moves differently when the rest of the world is asleep. My husband left in the winter of 1991. Fletcher was 7. I had a nursing certificate, a 2-bedroom apartment in Etobicoke, and exactly $2,400 in a checking account. I kept working. That is the whole story, really. I kept working and I paid attention. The first time I heard the phrase power of sale, I was finishing up a room turnaround at 2 in the morning, and one of the overnight orderlies was in the hallway, arguing on the phone about a townhouse in Brampton that a bank was offloading because the owners had defaulted. He kept asking, "But how much below market?" And I kept working and listening. The next day I went to the library. In 1993, that's what you did. I bought that Brampton townhouse for $78,000 in the spring of 1993. Everyone thought I had lost my mind. My mother asked if I'd had a breakdown. My sister didn't speak to me for a month because she thought I was gambling with Fletcher's future. The real estate market was still shaky after the early 90s correction, and nobody wanted to touch it. I rented both units. The income covered the mortgage and left me $340 a month. I put it away. The next year, I found another power of sale, then another. I used the equity from the first property as a down payment on the second. I read every book in the Mississauga Public Library on real estate investment, landlord and tenant regulations, Ontario corporate structures. I took a weekend course at Sheridan College. Fletcher thought I was picking up extra shifts. By 2003, I owned 7 properties. By 2012, 14. By the time Fletcher graduated from architecture school and landed his first proper job, I had 23 units across the Greater Toronto area, and I was watching a 6-story commercial building on King Street go through power of sale proceedings because the previous owner had overextended on renovations and couldn't service the debt. I bought it in 2017 for $2.8 million cash through the numbered company. Philip Arsenal, no relation to anyone, managed the property under a commercial property management agreement. The rent came in. I set it aside. The GICs in the envelope my daughter-in-law put behind the flowers were entirely separate. Savings I'd kept in registered accounts since 1992, compounding in the background, never touched. At current value, $3.8 million. I had planned to give them to my son when he needed them most. I thought the opening of his own firm was that moment. I drove home along the Gardiner with the heat turned up and the radio off. All those lights, all those buildings, the whole city spread out behind me in the rearview mirror. I thought about 33 years of overnight shifts. About eating lunch alone in the break room so I could put an extra $40 in the account instead of spending it somewhere. About the particular sound of the hospital at 3 a.m, the low hum of the floor, polisher 2 hallways over, the soft, alert tones that became background noise after the first month. 3 seconds. That's how long it took her. I have a financial planner named Howard who has worked out of a small office in Oakville since 2004. Howard is a careful, quiet man who has never reacted to anything I've told him with more than a slight tilt of his head. That Monday morning after the party, I sat across from and placed the envelope on his desk. I want to redirect the beneficiary structure on everything in the GIC accounts, I said. Howard tilted his head, Fletcher's designation. Remove it for now. He looked at me for a moment. And the King Street building. I want to review the lease and begin conversion planning. A longer tilt. The current commercial tenants are 18 months from end of term. I'm aware. I want to start the residential conversion application with the city. The incentive program for commercial to residential. That's a significant renovation, Howard said. The property generates solid returns as is. I know what it generates. He opened his laptop. I have a neighbor named Patrice who has lived across the hall from me for 11 years. Patrice is 71, retired from Canada Post, and has never asked me a question she didn't actually want answered. Over tea that Tuesday evening, I told her what had happened at the party. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "And Fletcher, what did he do?" He looked at the floor. Patrice wrapped both hands around her mug. "My boy did the same thing for 4 years after he married Darlene," she said. "Fletcher's always had a backbone." Then he left it in his other jacket. I laughed, the first time I'd laughed since Friday. It surprised me. The call I did not expect came on a Wednesday 11 days after the party. I was just home from an overnight shift, still in my scrubs, when my phone rang. A 905 area code I didn't recognize. "Is this Lorna Beckett?" "It is." "My name is Claude Arsenal, forensic accountant, Arsenal and Associates in Oakville. I've been retained by Meridian Developments in connection with an ongoing billing dispute." A pause. I understand you're the mother of Fletcher Beckett, principal of Beckett Studio Design. I sat down at the kitchen table. We've identified a pattern of invoice irregularities across 3 Meridian projects over the past 22 months, he said. Fees billed for site visits, consultant coordination, and permit processing that appear not to have occurred as documented. The amounts involve total approximately $315,000 CAD. I stared at the salt shaker on my kitchen table. We're at a preliminary stage, he said. Our intent is civil recovery, not criminal. However, depending on the findings, we may be obligated to notify the Ontario Association of Architects. After I hung up, I sat for 40 minutes without moving. Outside, the first real snow of the season was falling. I watched it come down in slow, soundless drifts. My son had been overbilling a client. $315,000. The renovation of my building, the one his firm occupied, the one he'd chosen because the neighborhood was perfect, had likely been funded, in part, with money that didn't belong to him. Still with me. Comment still here. It means more than you know. I called Howard. Then I called a private investigator Howard had referred clients to before, a man named Alan Gagnon, former Ontario Provincial Police, who worked out of a low-key office in Hamilton. I told him what Arsenault had told me. I told him I needed to understand how deep it went before I decided anything. Alain Gagnon did not look like a former police officer. He looked like a retired shop teacher. Large, unhurried, reading glasses perpetually sliding down his nose. He drank his coffee black and ate his Tim Hortons sandwich in 3 bites and took notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting too small to read from across the table. 2 weeks later, we sat in a corner booth and he laid it out for me. The billing irregularities were exactly what Arsenault had described. Gagnon's own review confirmed the numbers and added context. On each of 3 Meridian projects, my son had billed for consultant fees that were either inflated or fabricated. Site engineers invoiced for more meetings than they'd attended. A permit facilitator billed hourly when she'd been paid a flat rate. Upon documentation charges, filings processed digitally at no cost. He's not the first architect to do this in the GTA development sector, Gagnon said, without judgment. He's also not the worst, but it's fraud. Does his wife know? Gagnon shook his head. Nothing I found suggests she was involved. Her finances are entirely separate. She doesn't touch the business accounts. I looked out the window at the gray November street. Meridian, how close are they to going formal? Arsenault's report is probably 2 weeks from being finalized. After that, Meridian's board decides between criminal and civil. He folded his hands on the table. What do you want to do with this? I had been asking myself that question for 2 weeks. I want my son to face it, I said, not have it collapse around him without warning, not find out through a knock on the door from someone with a badge. I paused. I want him to see the whole picture at once, from me. Gagnon looked at me steadily. That's unusual. I'm aware. I called my son that evening. Not to tell him what I knew, just to talk. He picked up on the second ring and immediately offered a brisk rehearsed apology about the party that sounded like something my daughter-in-law had suggested he say. She can be a bit much at work events, he said. I didn't know how she was at work events. I hadn't been invited to enough of them to find out. I want to see you, I said, in person, Saturday morning. Come for breakfast. Is everything okay? Everything is fine, I said. I want to have breakfast with my son. Saturday, my kitchen, 9 in the morning. They arrived together, my daughter-in-law in a wool coat that cost more than my bi-weekly take-home used to. Fletcher in the same jacket he'd had since graduate school. He still wore things until they fell apart. I had always loved that about him. I had made a proper breakfast, back bacon, eggs, toast, orange juice, coffee on the table. My daughter-in-law looked at the spread, the way people look at a menu they've already decided they don't want. I won't stay long, she said, unwrapping her scarf. I have a class at 11. Sit down, I said, not unkindly, just clearly. She sat. We ate in the kind of silence that has weight to it. Fletcher asked about the hospital. I told him I was reducing my shifts in the spring. My daughter-in-law checked her phone twice and then placed it face down on the table. When the plates were cleared, I went to the sideboard. I took out a folder and set it on the table between us. Fletcher looked at it. Mom, what is this? The lease for your office space, I said. The commercial lease for the King Street building held by the property owner. He picked it up, scanned the first page. Why do you have? And then he stopped. His eyes went back to the top of the document. Read the name a second time. 2241847 Ontario Limited, I said. I registered that company in 1998. The color left my daughter-in-law's face in stages. You own the building, Fletcher said. I've owned it since 2017. Power of sale on a defaulted commercial mortgage. Your studio has been paying rent to my numbered company for 3 years. Fletcher set the lease on the table with great care, as if it might shatter. The King Street building, he said. Yes. You've been for 3 years. Yes. Silence. My daughter-in-law stood. Excuse me, she said, in a voice I had not heard from her before, stripped of its finish, uncertain at the edges, and walked to the hallway. I let her go. Mom, Fletcher's voice was very quiet, the Jeeks at the party. 3.8 million, I said, in registered accounts since 1992. The real estate holdings are separate, built from rental income compounded over 30 years, 2 different pools, nothing mixed. He pressed both hands flat on the table. There's something else, I said, and slid the second folder across to him. He looked at it without touching it. A forensic accountant named Arsenal called me 3 weeks ago, retained by Meridian Developments. I kept my voice steady. The billing irregularities on the Meridian projects, the inflated consultant fees, the permit processing charges for work that wasn't documented correctly. He said it totals around $315,000. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a snowplow rumbled down the street. Fletcher, I said, look at me. He looked up. His eyes were wet, which I had not expected. Tell me, I said. He was quiet for a long moment. It started because we were short on the King Street build-out, he said finally. The renovation came in over budget and I told myself I'd correct it in the next billing cycle, and then it kept going. To pay for the office. Yes. My building, I thought. He had stolen from a client to pay rent on my building, not knowing it was mine. Camille's vision for the office, I said. Did she know where the money was coming from? He shook his head. She had ideas about how things should look. I tried to deliver them. That's not an excuse. No, I said, it's not. We sat with that. What do I do? He said. It came out the way questions come out from much younger people. You call Meridian on Monday morning, I said. Before Arsenault's report is filed, you disclose. You negotiate repayment in full. You contact the OAA before they contact you. I folded my hands on the table. And you do it honestly, without a lawyer coaching you to minimize. Because the difference between someone who made a serious mistake and someone who committed fraud is whether they faced it or tried to bury it. He nodded slowly. And us, he said. That depends on what comes next, I said, not on what's already happened. My daughter-in-law came back from the hallway. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me, really looked at me, for what I think was the first time, with an expression that had nothing performative left in it. The Jeeks at the party, she said. 3.8 million. Yes. And the building. Yes. And other properties. 23 units across the GTA. She was quiet for a moment. I've been a nurse for 33 years, I said, night shifts. I paid attention to what was possible if you were patient and didn't spend what you saved. My daughter-in-law sat down, not in her original chair, just in the nearest one, as if her legs had made the decision without consulting her. My mother at the party, she said. What she said about appropriate gift-giving. Yes. She's said things like that before. I didn't stop her. She looked at her hands. I put the envelope behind the flowers. I know. I'm sorry, she said. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm sorry. People surprise you sometimes. I heard you, I said. Fletcher called Meridian on Monday morning, before Arsenault's report was complete. He disclosed everything and agreed to full repayment on a structured schedule. He filed a voluntary disclosure with the Ontario Association of Architects on Tuesday. His lawyer told him a 6-month license suspension was the likely outcome, not permanent, not a full revocation, but real, a consequence with weight to it. The city approved my conversion application in February. 38 residential units where 6 floors of commercial office space used to be. 15 units at below market rate. Priority given to nurses, teachers, personal support workers, anyone working in essential services. The heritage brick exterior stays. The ground floor becomes a common room. Tables, a small library corner, enough chairs for people who need a place to sit that isn't their apartment. Fletcher had 14 months remaining on his lease, enough time to find new space, enough time to figure out what the firm would look like on the other side of all this. The conversion broke ground in April. I was there the morning they started framing the first residential floor. Patrice came with me. We stood in hard hats in the shell of what used to be expensive office space and watched the crew work and drank Tim Hortons from paper cups and didn't say much. "How's Fletcher?" Patrice asked eventually. "Panel hearing is in June," I said. "He's been taking contract work with a smaller firm in the meantime, doing it right." "And his wife?" I thought about this. She came for dinner last month. She didn't bring her mother. Patrice made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Progress. "Some," I said. The grand opening was on a Saturday in October. The city sent a counselor who gave a short speech about housing strategy and community investment. I didn't attend the speech. I was on the 4th floor helping a woman named Donna, a hospital support worker who'd been on the city's affordable housing wait list since 2021, carry boxes of kitchens from the service elevator to her new front door. When she shook my hand at the threshold, her eyes were full. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't need to," I said. "You were on that list for 3 years. You showed up every time they asked for updated documents. You earned your spot." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and went inside. Fletcher was there that day. He and my daughter-in-law had come early and worked quietly all morning, holding elevator doors, making coffee runs, carrying things for families who needed an extra pair of hands. Nobody asked them to come. They showed up anyway. Late in the afternoon, after most families had settled in, my son found me sitting on the stairs in the stairwell, resting my back against the wall. He sat down beside me without asking. "Mom," he said. "I know," I said. "The envelope at the party. I should have said something. I should have." "You looked at the floor," I said. "Yes." "Don't do that again." "I won't." We sat there and listened to the building around us. Voices through walls, furniture being dragged across floors, a child laughing somewhere on the 2nd level. The sounds of people settling into something they could keep. "The GX," he said eventually. "What happens to them?" "Still in trust," I said, "for when you've earned them." "How do I earn them?" I looked at my son, who was going to rebuild his professional reputation, one careful, honestly billed job at a time, who had made a serious mistake and chosen to turn and face it, who still wore the same jacket from graduate school. "Keep showing up," I said. Keep doing the work correctly. You'll know. He nodded, didn't argue, didn't push. That, I thought, was a start. I drove home along the Gardner that evening, the same way I had driven it the night of the party, 11 months before. The city glittered behind me in the November dark. All those buildings, all that light, all those people trying to make something out of what they had. 33 years of overnight shifts, 23 units, one building that was now 38 homes. I had spent most of my life invisible, to colleagues who didn't notice what I made of my lunch breaks, to a daughter-in-law who measured worth by what things looked like, to a city that didn't think to wonder what the night shift nurse was building while everyone else slept. That was fine. I hadn't built any of it to be seen. But I had learned something that year that I wished I'd understood sooner. The envelope I should have opened a long time ago wasn't the one I gave my son at his party. It was the one I'd kept sealed my entire life, the one with my own name on it. The one that said, plainly, what I had made, and that it was enough, and that I had always been worth more than what they thought they saw when they looked at me. It took someone setting a gift behind a flower arrangement for me to finally open it. I drove home through the November dark, the city receding in the mirror, and for the first time in a very long time, I was not in any hurry at all.